and welcome to Evolve Beyond Borders 2023. Very excited to have all of you here, and even more excited to share with you the discussion that we're going to have around a provider perspective to global payroll transformation. What's new on the table? It's not very often that you have a team of the world's foremost provider experts on one single call talk about the future of payroll. So without any further ado, let me bring on stage our first speaker for today, Tristan Woods. Tristan heads up the product at Safeguard Global. He's a veteran of the industry, having spent over 20 years in payroll and part of the original leadership team at Safeguard. He has a strong background in operations, implementation, and payroll technology. Tristan loves helping customers solve their payroll and HR transformation challenges and is a huge advocate of providing teams freedom to achieve great things for their organizations. Tristan is based out of Scotland, and as a father of 2 young boys, is very quickly becoming an expert in negotiations and diplomacy. I know the feeling, Tristan. Welcome to Evolve Beyond Borders 2023. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. Yes.
Let me bring on board the next person, John Pearce. John Pearce is the Senior Vice President for Payroll Operations at CloudPay, and he's responsible for all of their customers' global payroll service and experience. John loves all things cricket and all things Star Wars. Clearly, the force is with John today as he smiles at us. Hi, John. Welcome to the Evolve Beyond Borders event. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Let me introduce the third person, Sachin Goklaney. Sachin is the Chief Commercial Officer at PayGroup and has led growth and disruption over the last 7 years across HR, global payroll, and payments for PayGroup, focusing on the best commercial outcomes for all stakeholders with a strong focus on solutions, ensuring that everybody has a win-win at the end of the day. And Sachin has a very interesting aspect to his life where he literally lives out of a plane. And the closest he gets to a stable home, he says, is 58 feet on a given plane, which I think is slightly far away from the wingtips. So thank you so much for making the time on terra firma. Sachin, welcome to Evolve Beyond Borders.
Thank you, Guhan, and hi again, Tristan and John.
Pleasure.
Wow, that is quite a panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for making that. Let's kick this off with Tristan. Tristan, in your view, how has global payroll for solutions and technology evolved over the last few years?
I think it's very interesting as a space to have been in for such a long time as the other guys have as well. When you think back, go back 15, 20 years ago, really the solution that customers were looking for is they wanted their one vendor to look after payroll, and there was very limited choice in the marketplace. There was probably 4 or 5 providers that were truly specializing in global payroll. And so we went from then, how do I just have one contract and one SLA to how do I start to embed more technology into the process? How do I, you look at 2010 timeframe, a little bit before, a lot more cloud HCM providers started coming to market. And so the question from the customer was, how do I integrate my HCM with my payroll? And of course that then has a big payroll dependency. And then we went fairly rapidly into the what I call the big data era. I'm sure the guys will remember this, that everybody got very excited about big data and what could we do with big data for HR and payroll. And then that went to the wayside reasonably quickly. And then it became all about how do I start to automate more of my payroll? And so, things like RPA or robotic process automation became a big, requirement for customers, and companies and vendors were starting to respond in that way as well. And so I think that the market shifted quite a lot. And now where we are is we're in this position where companies have got a lot more choice. I think that, again, if we go back 10 years or so from now, the marketplace was waiting for some proof points that the global payroll and single solution providers was really a thing. And of course, since that's that's been proven. We've got a lot more stability, if you like, if that's the term. And what we've seen then is a lot more regional players, growing and doing a really good job of that. And there's a big presence out in, APAC region. Europe again is fairly robust and well served in terms of vendors, and South America sort of catching up with that as well. So I think it's just been a very interesting journey to see what happens, with that. And I think now what we're seeing is more evolution around continued, pieces to do with automation, but also divesting a lot more responsibility outwardly within the organization. So companies and HR teams are getting more, asked to do more with less, but they're also becoming much more of that sort of strategic business partner, especially in a sort of post-pandemic era. We could talk a bit more about that later. But I think those, that's what's been interesting watching the space over the last sort of 15, 20 years. And Sachin and John, if you've got your own perspectives to that, feel free to add those too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting points there, and we kind of see the same throughout our own customer base. Recently, what we have seen an increase kind of demand for it is technology that will also enhance the employee experience. So, for a long time, companies have been really focused on their internal payroll machine, like the big data element and now the automation element that Tristan spoke of. But now we're starting to have requests coming in for, how are you going to make my employees' experience of their pay better? How are you going to optimize it? How are you going to allow us to become an employer of choice because of the way we deliver our payroll services to our employees? So I think, some providers have some really cool things like chatbots that can explain your pay slips. Some other companies have apps that allow you access to earn wages, but all these kind of things that are very unique if you're working at that company that uses that provider are actual things that can help that employer, that company, provide that unique employee experience, and that in the war for talent, that helps them with their retention and attraction of new talent. So I think that's a really interesting thing for us folks that are in global payroll to be conscious of, and gives us a real, a nice new exciting avenue for us to follow in terms of technology, and how can we come up with new innovations and disruption to really stand out amongst the crowd and enable some of those kind of employee experience desires from global company. And just to round that off, I think what we also find, and I completely agree with Tristan and John, is a lot of organizations have changed their balance of employee type. You've got full-timers, contractors, EORs, or employer of record services around the world. And even with the challenges of compliance in every jurisdiction, and we'll come to that later, I believe, they just want one view of their entire workforce. Yeah. And can technology deliver that? So that's been a really good challenge for years. And I think that's one of the holy grails that experts like Tristan have been part of product, and experts like John have been looking to consolidate the operational aspect of it. So yeah, that's the boring answer, but the one that's been lingering for years.
No, I think that's a fascinating one, because I don't know what you're seeing, but I think that this whole, how does the company deal with the extended workforce, as I would call it, your employees and your non sort of direct employees. And what's happening now is you've got vendors like ourselves who are seeing, we look at payroll through probably quite a specific lens. And there's lots of newer entrants who are in the sort of EOR space that are starting to talk about global payroll, but actually what that means can be kind of different to the way we look at it. And absolutely right, how do companies think of payroll and HR teams as that partner that can help them with, as John mentioned, the war for talent and looking after the employee experience and managing the fact that, the way that people operated and the power balance between employee and company 3 years ago is very different to what it is now, significantly. And so we've all got to kind of respond to that. So as John said, it's just a really interesting time to see what's happening and what's evolving and what are the real things that make a difference to everybody involved.
Oh, I think that's a very fascinating journey and different perspectives from Tristan, John, and Sachin as well. So, clearly we've come a long way from global payroll being an oxymoron to not just being reality, but now people are asking for more out of their global payroll. Now, when you have organizations that are looking to understand some of the best practices in consolidating and transforming payroll, clearly there will be a few pitfalls along the way. So let me ask you, John, from an operational perspective, what do you think are the best practices an organization needs to think about when they're thinking about a global strategy for it?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. It's always going to be an interesting question, but I think some of the best practices that any organization approaching or considering to go through a global payroll transformation need to consider is, firstly, it's going to be a big, long, difficult journey, and you need to be prepared for that. So you need to be resilient and understand that it's not something that can be done relatively easily. Companies should take a really long time to understand their requirements, what their current state is. You know, it's no good going out to procure a new global payroll service if really you don't have the advanced understanding of what your company needs. So we see instances of buyers coming out. Maybe they know their countries and their headcount, but they don't really know, apart from they want to buy payroll, what they really need. And that can lead you to a very bad place very quickly. So I think, you know, as an organization, you need to understand, what have you outsourced to your local provider? Is it just payroll? Is there HR services? Is there accountancy in there? What are you going to need to replace as you start this transformation and you start to standardize from a lot of single providers into a single global provider? How's that all going to work? You really need to have a strategy for not just what your organization is going to need from its global payroll for now, but what's the objectives, what's the wider company strategy for the next 3 to 5 years, and make sure you pick a provider that's going to be able to support that journey. What you don't want to do is be changing a global payroll provider every 2 to 3 years. So you really need to, you know, ideally, you're going to make a great first pick, and you're going to be able to stay there for a long time, because then you can really get the benefits of that transformation. So things like, are your company going to be looking to expand quickly? Are they going to need, you know, a provider that can really help them set up and be nimble into new countries, even as we spoke earlier, not just helping you get a new entity created, but maybe providing an EOR solution as you step into those countries to start with. Those are kind of some great newer options that are attracting a lot of attention and can be really valuable for customers to help them react nimbly in global markets. Now, is your company one that's going to be focused on cost control? You know, you're going to need a provider that not just deliver the payroll, but can do it really efficiently and allow you to be efficient, so that you can really, really understand and control your costs that you expend on global payroll provision. Is your company someone that has big integration aspirations? You know, are you going to be looking to connect into a global HCM, a global ERP? What provider is going to be able to offer that integration support to you, that's going to give you the value, but also not leave you with a big custom sort of overhead of maintaining those integrations across the journey of your life cycle? And also, again, the newer one that we're seeing, well, what are the company's employee experience aspirations? You know, are you trying to provide something new and unique to those employees? Are you going to try and add some more value to the company rather than just providing an efficient and an accurate payroll service? You're actually going to try and go that one step further and buy something that adds to the company in terms of attrition, retention, all of those wonderful things that are becoming more heightened and more focused from companies' leadership. Then I think you need to understand the ability of your organization to execute a transformation project, and you've got to be really honest with yourself when you do this internal review. You need to look at how much staffing and resource you're going to put in, and the capabilities of that resource that you're going to make available. You're going to need to get hold of a whole lot of data to make that transformation successful. So you really, again, spend the time to understand where that data is right now, and how are you going to transform it? Are you going to ask the legacy provider to do it? Are you going to do it? Is the new provider going to do it? There's a lot of different ways of making it, but you should have a clear plan. I think one of these best practices that I've seen consistently is that organizations that are willing to spend money on project management generally are a lot more successful than organizations who perhaps just put in their payroll team and allow them to get on with the project themselves. I think although it's an additional expense for the project, having somebody who's an experienced global payroll transformation project manager, you can't, however much you pay them, you will get that value back in terms of avoiding a lot of these pitfalls that we're talking about. And again, I guess maybe my third main bucket of best practices as you enter this transformation is really to understand the business case and the return on investment that you're going to expect, and how are you going to measure that as you move through the project. You are doing this transformation for a reason, and you've got to be really clear to track your project and your progress to make sure that you're going to hit those objectives, and that you're going to make that business case work when you get to the end of it. There's lots of little details involved in tracking that, not just the cost of the vendor that you're moving to, but exit costs from current providers, data collection costs, advice, external staffing, consultants and contractors that you might wish to bring on board. And then I'll go one more, which is getting that local buy-in. So you're a global corporate and you've found this wonderful vendor that meets your business strategy, really aligns to where you are now and where you want to be. You've got to remember that you're going to be taking 20, 30, 40 different local countries with you, and they need to understand why the business is doing it, what's in it for them, how are you going to make their lives better, how are you going to make sure they have everything they need, but also the global corporate gets the advantage that they're looking for. And that's a really tricky piece of the puzzle. It always has been. I don't see that changing. But take the time with your local stakeholders to get them on board so they can come along with the journey. I've seen a lot of issues where you've got local resistance, where they don't really understand the value for them in particularly, and that can really derail a transformation project very quickly. I've done a lot of talking, so maybe I should give Tristan and Sachin a go at this one as well.
Oh, no. I think, John, you made a lot of very interesting points and very valid ones at that, right? I had a local person at one of our customers explained to me, global payroll decisions are made globally and suffered locally. So much like something else, but I think that's exactly true, right? So Sachin and John made a very interesting comment about this being a journey, right? It's not a one and done. It's not something you just buy a plug-in and so Sachin, in a journey like this, right? And different organizations are at different stages. Some of them have already outsourced, some of them have it in-sourced, some of them have a product. So what do you think are the recommendations for these global organizations at the various stages they are in their journey?
Given we're talking about payroll here, you have to, irrespective of a small or large transformation, continue your focus on compliance. Don't lose that focus. The second piece is you've got your strategy. John was talking about stick to your strategy or why you're doing this. It's a 3 to 5 year strategy, right? Don't change it because some provider tells you that's the wrong or right thing to do. They don't know your business that well. Take the advice, but don't have to necessarily follow it. And then you've got 2 buckets of organizations here. The first bucket that has never been down this before. What are they doing it for? Are they doing it for a streamlining of process? Are they doing it because they're non-compliant? In some countries they've expanded to, and it's quite common. Are they doing it for cost saving or efficiency is probably a better word? Are they doing it for accuracy and timeline? We talk about timeline in a sense that, is my payroll calendar great? Well, it's more important to get the payroll right in timely fashion so you can actually make the payment on time. So it depends on the strategy of a first timer, even though you're a small, medium, or large organization. And if you're that kind of an organization going through it, the recommendation is don't go big bang. You've not done it before. It's a long journey. As John said, it could be a difficult one. A project manager is a great idea. It's a great recommendation, and it keeps you honest. You've got to be focused. If you're going to choose the first phase, don't change it halfway because something goes wrong. So changing strategy midway has tendency to cause issues in the long term. And then you've got your second bucket of people who've already been doing this, right? They've been with a provider for years. And for one reason or another, they want to change. And what is their strategy and reason for changing? It's non-compliant in some areas, and the provider just isn't good enough in certain areas. And this comes back to John's point earlier. Choose a provider that meets your strategy. If you're going to expand to, say, Latin America and you're an Asia-Pacific organization, don't choose a provider that doesn't know how to get there with you. So it's those experienced ones that probably know how to do it, but there's a reason they're changing, and they take the bad experiences from previous providers and go particularly hard on the new one. They only focus on those areas and don't really focus on the overall objective that has never changed. You want a vendor to keep you fully compliant, provide you the efficiencies, provide you the reporting, the single view, the cool functionality that we mentioned earlier, like maybe on-demand pay. You know, just because you've had one bad experience, it's not always a provider. It is a communication loss somewhere. It's that big data misthinking that you think that everything is rosy, that you've got everything in one place. So keep your strategy very focused. Don't change course, even though there can be pitfalls, and there will be pitfalls. You're going to do multiple countries, you're going to have issues. That whole piece around local buy-in will hit you, but keep at it. And that's the biggest recommendation we can give. So at the end of the day, it's to ensure that you're doing it for the right reasons. At every stage of transformation, have your milestones, have your checks. Why did we miss certain pieces? Is it because of this? Take that learning to the next phase. But never lose sight of compliance, testing, controls, and above all, never lose sight of the fact that your employees don't care who you've chosen. They want to be paid on time.
Well, Sachin made a lot of great points. Thank you, Sachin, around the entire journey and the customer experience, right? So, especially around the fact that as long as the payroll is right, the employee doesn't really care. If the payroll is wrong, the employee and his cousin and everybody else have an opinion on how to fix payroll and make sure that it is done correctly. Right? Now, with all of this, from the journey that Tristan described to all of the challenges in the implementation, and making sure that we're staying straight. So, Tristan, what do you see as the future of global payroll? What kind of changes do you see in this space in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of areas I'd probably focus that on. So firstly, within the sort of global payroll marketplace as we know and love it now, as John mentioned earlier, employee experience is becoming really important. Financial wellness tools, whether those are earned wage access or helping people better understand, the makeup of their pay, potentially how they're spending their money and how to do more with that money, I think is a really big one. It's key for all the reasons that John mentioned around talent acquisition and retaining your people, and and these are big topics at the moment. But I think that the other macro topic is how does the nature of the global workforce change? So as we mentioned earlier on, direct employees used to be 70%, 80% of the global workforce market. Now it's something nearer to 50 because many companies have an extended workforce. You've got the gig economy, you've got people who are on sort of contractor arrangements, you've got employer record solutions, you've got traditional employees. So as a marketplace, what we need to respond to is the fact that the workforce has changed, and we need to be able to support companies with how they do that, how they can win, their own wars for talent. How can they generate their own competitive advantage by being able to go global and to get and work with the talented people that today could be in any one of 200 countries that aren't currently working for them. And then how does the company understand, where these people are, how they using that money to best effect, and what outcome and value they're getting from their investments, when your global payroll today generally means, pay slips and taxation and those things, but tomorrow it's very different because of the different ways that people can engage talent. And that's the big one that I think is outside of technology and process and speed and all the other things that the market wants to do, the changing global workforce makeup is the most interesting one for me. I'd be curious what the other chaps think.
Fascinating. John?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Tristan. I think global payroll is going through one of the most significant changes that I've seen in the last 15 to 20 years. The customer has a lot more varied demands. It's not just a case of the traditional employer-employee run the global payroll calculation. Companies now want to employ the best talent, even if they don't have an entity there. And for that, they, ideally they want to use their global payroll provider to do that. And that means they have to have a much broader range of solutions and services. So I think that will continue to go. I think the pandemic and COVID accelerated that, but I don't think it's going to go away. I think one of the key ways that some companies will use to attract and retain the talent is being able to employ them wherever that person would live, and that requires different solutions than the very traditional payroll model. And again, I think technology will continue to enable and help providers and companies stand apart in the market by adding to that employee experience. If you can't do something on your mobile phone nowadays, I think, there's a certain generation of people a lot younger than us guys, but, if you can't do it on your mobile phone, we're not really interested. It's not cool. So enabling all of that mobile technology so that the employee, the end user, can have the full experience just through their mobile. So it's nice and easy. They have access to different products. We mentioned earned wage access. We mentioned financial well-being. Everything needs to be mobile. And I think the companies that can crack that all-rounded solution will be the ones that are able to best serve global companies and can continue to have a real impact on the global payroll market.
Fantastic, John. That's a very interesting perspective. Sachin?
Thanks, Guhan. I get the pleasure of wrapping this up, I guess. But I look, they're very consistent themes. The consistent themes are how do you provide a single solution to customers who have different employee verticals in markets that they are or are not in, and they don't have to worry about compliance because they've chosen the right provider. Now, how technology is helping, Tristan and John have explained really well, of bringing either a mobile device or a mobile-enabled device, providing financial well-being. And it all boils down to how do you give each employee anywhere in the world, whether they're a contractor, full-time or casual or whatever, the same experience. That doesn't mean the same benefits because each country has its own compliance and terms and employment regulations, but the same equality of experience. Why should someone who's an employee of a large organization in Europe or US have a much better experience than somebody who is an employee of the same company in their subsidiary in somewhere in Asia Pacific or in Africa or in the Middle East? So it's the challenge of providing the same unique experience of equality. And then all the things that we talk about in human resource information system, all the modules that a company can acquire from a vendor, as long as you've provided equality to your work base, I think you'll have a very good relationship. And that still hasn't been achieved yet. I know we talk about it and it sounds logical, but it hasn't been achieved yet. So the future of payroll should focus on compliance and giving each employee, I guess, equality.
That very nice, Sachin. I think, putting all of this together, and Tristan made a very interesting point about financial wellness. There's a lot of conversation about, people's mental health and physical health and so on. But I think the fiscal or the financial wellness is also a very important aspect, and probably a great start to a New Year resolution to start thinking about what you're going to do with the money once it hits your bank from payroll, right? And I really like how John pointed out, isn't there an app for it? Is an entire generation now, right? So, and I think in probably a few years from now, that generation will find out what it means to not have an app for something else. So, and as Sachin called out very nicely, it's the equality of the experience, right? So an employee wants to feel as valued or have access to the same tools, because the world definitely has become flatter. It's not, if it could be anymore, right? Because everybody has access to the same set of tools that one would use. So they expect the same consumer-grade experience in payroll as well. So clearly, I think all three of you were clearly aligned around the fact that the employee is going to be the center of this entire global payroll experience going forward, and organizations are sort of building their entire strategy around making sure that they can create a better experience for them in this war for talent. So that's a very interesting perspective on the future of global payroll. So with that, let me say thank you to John, Sachin, and Tristan for having spent time and talking to us about a very, very unique provider perspective on global payroll, what the transformation journey looks like, and most interestingly, what the future looks like. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Guhan.
Thank you. Thank you.